Good afternoon, how's it going? Today is Friday, July 18th, 2025. Currently 87 degrees Fahrenheit, that is 30 degrees Celsius. It is a hot summer day here in Northern California. Out there is Lake Mendocino. Lots of people getting wet and cooled off in it. This is the area where I am from. As I said, July 18th, the last video that I filmed on the Greek island of Rhodes was filmed on July 6th. I haven't done any filming for the past 12 days. So this video is basically going to be telling the whole story of the past 12 days, although most of it is going to be about my intense 5 days of traveling from Halki Island, Greece, next to Rhodes Island, all the way back here. Now, for those who don't like the long stories, because this is necessarily going to be a long one, because there are a lot of details, but for those who don't like the long drawn-out stories, I'm going to do something a little bit different this time and tell you the very short version first, and then tell the long version after that. So here we go. Here is the very short version of this story. I caught a flight from Rhodes Island, Greece to Amsterdam, Netherlands. Spent the night there. The next day, caught 2 flights from Netherlands to Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, layover, and then flight to Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where my car had been parked for the past 7 months at Drifter Dave's apartment, and then picked up my car, drove south to the United States. There you go. That is it. I think that was under a minute story there. So hopefully some of you appreciate that. And you can now turn off the video if you don't want to hear all of the very long, specific details, which I think are going to be pretty interesting. There's going to be a lot packed into this as far as just the traveling experience and various challenges and filling in the details of everything that happened, the decision-making process to come back here, all of that stuff coming up. And as you can probably see, I suspect this is going to turn into a long video. So first, the quick overview. There you go. Lovely Lake Mendocino, which is a reservoir that was created, I forget when, early to mid 20th century, I believe. There was a valley here. There were some businesses, I believe, including quite possibly some wineries, which were, kicked out, and then the valley flooded. And speaking of wineries, as I showed on that bulletin board there at the beginning of the trail, it said Winery Point. That is where I'm walking to in the course of this video, an abandoned winery. So I was trying to decide, where do I start this video? So I'm going to start the video on a flight. I believe it was the flight from Sicily, Italy to Katowice, Poland, or else it was the flight from Athens, Greece to Sicily, Italy. So that was like over a month ago now. And this is highly relevant to both my travel plans as I was making them back in Greece, and also my future travel plans now going forwards from here. So I was sitting on the flight, whichever one it was, reading through the in-flight magazine, and I came across an ad for a dentist in Chisinau, Moldova. And so I took a picture of the ad. The reason is because I hadn't had a dental appointment since around exactly a year ago, last summer sometime. And so I wanted to get a cleaning. It was time, as well as a checkup. and figured Moldova would be cheap. The place was, advertising that they, had good service and everything, so it sounded like a pretty reliable option. I've wanted to go back to Moldova since the one and only time that I was there, way back in 2019. And so I thought, well, maybe that is a potential route of mine, is to factor in Moldova, get the dental stuff done. Also, Moldova is outside of the Schengen area. Moldova is not in the Schengen zone, even though it is technically Europe, but not a Schengen country. So then you can spend time there that you aren't using up your Schengen days. So that kind of all around made sense. So continue on my way, get to Poland and to Zakopane. I am in Zakopane. I buy some cheese and crackers, these really seedy crackers, and I'm munching on them, and I feel something hard in my mouth, and I think that it is part of a shell, and so I take it out, and it looks kind of weird. It's like dark gray or something, and I just throw it away. And then seconds or a minute or two later, I notice, oh man, there was a hole in my tooth where there was not a hole before. You can feel the ridge. Something has broken off, and most likely a filling broke and fell out. And sure enough, that is in fact what happened. Now, fortunately, no pain. It feels weird, but it isn't getting in my way. But considering that I had just taken that photo of the ad for a dentist in Moldova, here we have some local wildlife, then that was seeming like an even more likely plan. So there's that. I now have a dental situation. So fast forward, I spend the next several days in Poland, go to Slovakia, and then am considering my plans from there. Decide I want to go back to Greece, and so I find a direct flight back to Greece, and then I'm on Rhodes, and then I think it was before I arrived on Halki that I had decided, you know what, I think that I am ready to wrap up this trip and head home. Now, I had really wanted to go to the Greek island of Chios, but getting there was looking fairly complicated. It wasn't a nice, short, simple ferry right away. And then the other Greek island I've mentioned that I really want to go to is Samothraki, but that is way in the north, and that's a whole, expedition getting up there. And so the places that I wanted to go next in Greece were going to be a big adventure, and I was just wearing down on the big adventures and thinking, well, factoring in everything, it's middle of summer back in the US. Why not head back and experience some summer here, get a break from the traveling, keep a month of my Schengen visa left for later that I could use in September after the summer crowds have left. It gets less expensive in Europe, it's less hot. And so I decided, okay, well, let's just do this one last big journey back home and then be able to get somewhere here and take a real break for a while and not be needing to film, as I haven't done for 12 days now, and see family and friends and all that kind of stuff. So I decided, okay, let's just wrap up this trip now. So I had booked a flight to Amsterdam because there was this good cheap flight direct from Rhodes to Amsterdam, and then I would figure out the next flight after that later, because then it was going to be a matter of getting from Amsterdam to Calgary. There were different ways to do it. I could spend a little time in Amsterdam maybe, although I've been there lots of times, so that wasn't high priority, but decided to book that first flight while it was available and super cheap. $112 direct flight on TUI Airlines. When I was back on Halki Island, then I was checking flight options to get to Calgary and found one that was perfect and fairly reasonable. Flying from Amsterdam, Netherlands on WestJet, Canadian airline, layover in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and then flight to Calgary, all in the same day. And this was the next day after my flight to Amsterdam. So the flight from Rhodes Island to Amsterdam was at 9:15 p.m., arriving after 12 midnight. So I get the ferry from Halkey Island to Rhodes, pick up my car, as I showed in the last video, drive to some ancient Greek ruins, take a swim at a beach, and drop the car off, get to the airport, and then catch that flight. And so that is where that last video ends. And so now we start the real story with a taxi situation. So I'm flying to Amsterdam. The Netherlands is not exactly known for taxi scams. And if I'm having a little bit of a rough time pronouncing my words today, in part it is because I went to the dentist yesterday and had a big operation. So that will be explained later, because that is obviously connected to what I was talking about with the filling falling out. So I arrive at the airport in Amsterdam. I pick up my bag and then head out. It is like 12:30, 12:45, 1 in the morning, somewhere around there. And it is pouring down rain. So that was very odd. I mean, I just haven't seen, rain, cold weather for a very, very long time on this trip. And it's, July. I just kind of wasn't expecting it. And so it's dark, it's raining. I step outside, and then the question is how to get to my hotel. It is about a 10-minute drive away from the airport. That was like the closest thing. Good deal, only $64 for a decent room. And so I consider taking Uber, which is of course the more reliable way to go, but the one drawback with Uber is the connecting to the Uber experience. The advantage of a taxi is if you see a taxi there, you walk over and you get in and you're off. It is, middle of the night. I'm not sure, how long it's going to take to get the Uber. I'm not sure where I will need to be to connect with the Uber. And so, considering that I'm in the Netherlands, I'm thinking, okay, it's going to be a little more expensive for the taxi, but, I'm happy to pay $5 more or whatever to skip the going into the app, ordering the Uber, waiting for it to connect with a driver, and then waiting for the car to show up, and then figuring out where they're going to be to actually catch it. At the moment, it feels like, okay, let's just head right to the taxi stand and catch a taxi. So I walk out to the taxi stand, and there are no taxis. There's only like 2 people in line, I guess just because it's middle of the night. And so I'm standing there waiting, and then a guy comes up from the side and says taxi. And so then you have that quandary of, okay, he didn't drive up, right there, but nobody's driving up right there for now. Here he is, taxi driver, offering a ride. And so I decided to go with it, and we walk over to the parking area, and he remarks, as we're walking there, something about the construction zone. There's a bunch of stuff under construction, and he says, we can't get over to the taxi area because of the construction, something like that, which may or may not have been true. But we walk into the parking garage and walk to a taxi, so at least it is in fact a proper taxi. And he says, use the meter. And so we get in, and in the taxi we take off, and there's a meter, but it is not counting up. It is not showing how much I'm being charged as we go along. And so then that's that quandary of, you know, do I cancel this whole thing and go back and yada yada, and I'm exhausted and just want to get to my hotel, and so, you know, decide just to go with it. And so we get there, and then he, you know, presses a button. The total price is 49, I think 70 euros, something like that. So almost 50 euros, or like $55 for a 10 or 12 minute taxi ride. Now, the Netherlands is expensive, and also it's middle of the night. And so I protest. I'm like, hey man, that just seems really expensive for a, you know, 10, 11 minute taxi ride. And he says, oh, middle of the night charge. And then he pulls up his phone and an app or website or something and says, oh, see, I show you how much it should be, you know. And I don't know if that's legit or what, but you know, what are you going to do at that point? I mean, it is what it is, and there's a number on the screen. At some point you have to decide how much it is worth your time and the hassle of trying to argue, haggle, whatever, to shave off 5, 10 euros, something like that. So I just pay it. Once I get to my hotel room, I check on Uber, and an Uber ride would have been like 30 something euros, I think. Maybe $30, 27 euros, something. So significantly less, but not like, you know, insanely less. You expect that a taxi is going to cost more, whatever. Maybe I got ripped off for 20 bucks. So it goes. And so my flight is at 2 p.m. I believe, or yeah, I think 2 in the afternoon the next day. Get some sleep the next morning, catch an Uber, and the price on Uber has now dropped way down, and it's only like 17, 18 bucks for the ride back to the airport. The price has dropped obviously because it is during the day and not midnight. So catch that flight to Halifax. The total flight to Calgary was around $700. I'll put that down below. But 7-hour flight to Halifax, Nova Scotia in eastern Canada, and then short layover there. I go through customs into Canada there. And so this brings up a whole issue which is part of this journey, which is crossing the border. Not the border into Canada, but the border into the US, which I am definitely a little concerned about. So I left the US back in December, before Trump took office. Now, just to be clear, I am not in favor of open borders. I believe in enforcing border laws, immigration laws. But regardless of how you feel about what's happening now in that regard, I think we can all agree that things have changed. And I am kind of, sort of, an immigrant, because I was born in Vancouver, Canada. That is why I have the Canadian passport. That is why I went to Calgary to begin with at the beginning of this trip, was to renew my Canadian passport. I had only gotten a Canadian passport once before, more than 20 years ago, and so I'd wanted to renew that for a long time. Also, as it turned out, that was an absolute essential move on my part, because so here we are at the abandoned winery and some cool graffiti. So I only had 4 blank pages in my US passport, and so that was a factor in my decision to get the Canadian passport as well. I didn't know how long this trip was going to be. You can get quite a few stamps onto 4 pages, but still, as things turned out, if I hadn't gotten the Canadian passport, I would have had to come home early because my US passport would have filled up, or stay in certain countries for longer just to avoid getting more stamps or something like that. But I now have a whole lot of stamps in my Canadian passport. A lot more than 4 pages worth. And so that was absolutely essential that I had that. I did use my US passport, I think only once on this trip to India, because I have the 10-year Indian visa, which is in a different passport. My passport that I got in 2014, which I then fully filled up in 2018 and had to get a new passport, the current US passport that I use, which now expires in 2028. But I got a 10-year Indian visa in 2016 in that older passport. And so because my Indian visa is in a US passport, different from the US passport that I actually use to enter most countries, but it obviously made sense to use my US passport to enter India. So definitely not the most amazing art or anything, but definitely very colorful. Food not bombs. Wrecked. How to love friend. Free fall. F Trump. FDT. Philippians. Don't cling to a mistake just because you spent a lot of time making it. True. All right, so let's do the walk back and see if I can wrap up this video by the time I get back to the car. Let's go this way first. So I have a short layover in Halifax, but after going through customs, I have some time left. I get some really good Mexican food, which I hadn't had in a long time, and Mexican food is my favorite cuisine. I've been eating it like crazy the past couple weeks. And then catch my flight from Halifax to Calgary. And that lands, I think, around 8:30 or 9. And I had booked another hotel in Calgary for that night. Now, I need to explain some stuff that I had been discussing with Drifter Dave. So Drifter Dave is another YouTuber. I will put a link to his channel down below. Some great stuff on there. He's just passed 50,000 subscribers, so congrats to that. And he has been posting a series of videos of Africa, traveling across West Africa, that has been really interesting. I've been following that one. So check it out and feel free to subscribe. And a big thanks to him for letting me park my car in front of his apartment. For the past 7 months, he really saved my butt. So my original plan was to drive up to Canada, check out Banff National Park, renew the Canadian passport, and then drive back down, park my car probably in Portland, and take off for this trip. But I got up there and it was really sketchy driving, December driving in Canada. Let's just take a really quick look over here, get another shot of the lake. My car, you know, doesn't have snow tires. There were snowy roads, not like crazy, like there hadn't just been a snowstorm or anything, but there was, you know, snow, slush, ice on the roads at certain points, and it wasn't really that fun. And then over the course of however long I was there, 10 days or so, then the temperatures dropped dramatically. and there might have even been snow in the forecast, I think so. And so I was really not excited about doing that drive again back down, especially in colder and worse conditions. When I'd driven up there, part of my calculation had been that the forecast was pretty sunny. And so I had put the word out on Instagram, I guess, asking if anybody in the area might have a place for me to park the car, and luckily Dave responded and helped me out there. So back in December, he had told me where his apartment was and said, you know, drive on down there, we'll park the car, and then he would give me a ride back up to Calgary, and we'd go have a beer there, because where he lives is actually about a 45-minute drive away from Calgary. And so I was in communication with Dave, letting him know I was going to be coming back, but I had told him earlier that I wouldn't be going back until later in July, most likely. And then we have the incident with the tooth, and just looking at my general travel plans, and so I changed my plans. The problem was, he was in Uzbekistan. He had just flown there a few days before, I think, and was just starting a big trip in which he might have been back in later July, but he wasn't there now, and there was nobody there that could get my keys to my car. No friends or anything that was going to, you know, be free, that would have access to his apartment, that could get me the keys. If I'd let him know beforehand I was coming back early, we could have, you know, arranged things. But that all happened kind of suddenly on my part. But there is a hidden key, and I'm fine with revealing this because I will reveal something else, which is that in order to actually drive my car, you need 3 keys. One for the door, one for the ignition, because one or the other had broken sometime when my mom had it. She gave me this car 5 years ago after driving it for 20 years. And so they'd had to replace one of those keys, and so there were 2 separate keys. And plus, I put an anti-theft device on the steering wheel because I've had some bad experiences with cars in the past. And you need a key for that. So those 3 keys are all hidden in 3 separate places. So if anybody sees this video who is a thief and decides they're going to try to steal my car based on that information, good luck finding 3 different keys. So I'm in touch with Dave, and he gives some advice about how to get down to his apartment and get the car without having to pay for an expensive taxi ride the whole way, because the public transportation getting there is not great. But there is a bus that goes part way. And so he tells me about Flixbus going to this other town that is then about 15 or 20 minutes away from his house. And so I look online on Flixbus and find the schedule and book a bus for that next day at 11 or 12 in the morning. And then I go to look for hotels. And I am absolutely shocked to find how expensive hotels are in Calgary. They are hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And so when I'd been in Calgary back in December, then I had a really nice hotel room, and it was only $64. I looked online on that video before starting filming this one. It was like $91, but that was Canadian. In US dollars, it was 64 bucks. So great deal. But now rooms are like $300, $400, $500 US. And I'm just like, whoa, I know it's summer, but what the hell? That is quite an increase. And then either then or sometime later, I realized, oh, it is the Calgary stampede right now. That's why. But I managed to find a hotel that is pretty close to the Flixbus stop, where I will catch the bus the next day, for $181. So still outrageously expensive, especially for Canada, because, you know, with the exchange rate, it should be cheaper, but that's better than $300, $400, $500, $600. So I arrive in Calgary, catch an Uber to the hotel, and spend the night there, get a decent night's sleep, wake up early, and get packed up, get out, go get some breakfast, and then walk over to the Flixbus stop. And so I arrived there like 45 minutes before the bus is going to come. And while I'm sitting there waiting for it, I check on Uber, and an Uber ride from where I am there to Dave's apartment is going to be about $99 US. So that's a chunk. But where I'm catching the bus to, the bus ticket was super cheap, like 17 bucks US, or maybe 17 Canadian, I forget. But where that bus will drop me, as I said, is like 15-20 minutes away from Dave's apartment. So I'm still going to need to catch an Uber from there. And that is outside of the city, and I'm thinking about it, and I don't feel fully confident that there is necessarily going to be an Uber there to get me over to Dave's apartment. Likely, there are Ubers that will go there, including all the way to Dave's apartment, but it's a little bit of a question mark there. And so I factor everything in. First of all, I'm about to begin a very, very, very long drive. It is 21 hours from Calgary to here. 21 hours straight driving. So you're looking at, 3 days of driving, which is what it took. I was considering parking my car in Portland, Oregon, and then catching a flight down here. I could have used a family member's car, visit family and stuff, but, well, I'll get to that later. So I'm sitting there thinking about, okay, first I'm going to kill 45 minutes sitting here waiting for the bus. Then a bus is going to take longer than a straight drive. Maybe it even has another stop along the way or something. And so it's going to take time to get to where it drops me. And then I have to order an Uber, hope that it is actually available. There's one around. It could be a bit of a wait. And then the drive to Dave's apartment. And so after about 5 minutes of thinking about it, I decide, you know what? It is worth $100 to, boom, get straight there, skip all that hassle. I'm already going to pay for an Uber that's going to be like $30 from where the bus drops me to the apartment anyway. So really it's only like $70 more. That is poison oak, folks. Watch out for it. It will make you very, very itchy. I have been very, very lucky to have never gotten poison oak in my life, even though I was raised in this area and raised in the woods with lots of poison oak around. So either I am immune to it or just very, very lucky. All right, my camera battery died there, which tells me indeed it is turning into a very long video. And I was overheating, so this feels much better on this hot, hot day. Okay, I see a guy and a dog. Let's get past them and wrap this up. That guy was so Mendocino County hillbilly. Big beard, cowboy kind of hat on, jeans, tucked in t-shirt, belt, walking along with the dog. Seemed like a cool guy. This area is big with rednecks, hillbillies, and hippies. So there's a real cultural mix around here. All right, so decided to go ahead and order the Uber. So order it, it arrives in like 5 minutes, and it's then going to be like only about a 35 or 40 minute drive, something like that, from where I am. So get a cool Uber driver from India. So of course we talked lots of India stuff. he drops me off, and I said to him, if you don't mind waiting 1 minute for me to check and make sure the first hidden key is actually there, that would be great. And he's fine with doing that, because I don't think I checked it anytime recently. I wasn't expecting to count on it, but I'd put it there, you know, last summer or something. And so get out of the Uber, and without, you know, being specific about where it was, I look, and at first it's not there. And then I feel around some more, and it had kind of moved a little bit, but still there. So with that one key, I then have access to the other keys. I'll just say that much. So say goodbye to the Uber driver. He takes off, and I get to work finding the other keys and putting my stuff in the car and checking things, etc. Start it up. Starts up right away. Dave had been, you know, starting it once a month or whatever. And so I get all ready to go. Get in the driver's seat. It's already going. Put it into reverse. Put off the emergency brake. Hit the gas. Nothing happens. It strains. It tries to go, but it can't go. I'm like, oh crap, what is going on? And so I then put it into first, try to go forwards. There's just a couple of inches, but just to see if it will move. No, it doesn't. Put it back into neutral. I mean, make sure that the emergency brake is in fact off, and it was, so put it on. Get out, look under the car. Is there something, you know, obviously broken? Was there maybe a device put on the wheel, you know, by the city or whatever, because it had been parking there too long? But no, I don't see anything out of the ordinary. And I'm really sweating bullets, like, oh man, if this car isn't going to move, it is such a totally different ball game of now I have a car to get fixed or to sell and catch a flight. You know, it's just like, oh man, this is going to be like now days of a diversion dealing with this situation, especially, you know, I'm in Canada, long ways from home. But I get back in and I'm thinking, okay, hopefully it is something stuck that is going to release. And so I try again. It doesn't want to move. I hit the gas harder. Something clunks. It starts rolling backwards. Boom, we are in business. Now, that doesn't leave me very confident about driving the thing now for 21 hours. But I decided just, you know, let's get going, see how it's moving, see if anything seems to be wrong. The brakes are very kind of noisy, obviously like rusted or whatever, and I suspect that is probably what the problem was the brakes, because of the extreme cold, had, well, you can't say frozen shut when it was, you know, middle of July, but rusted shut or something like that. We're back at the wildlife painting. Let's take another look. There's some more. Squirrel, birds, raccoons, bears, hawk or falcon or something, mountain lion. So the car is now moving. The brakes are sounding really rough. I go fill up the gas tank and decide to just get going, and if anything seems, you know, especially out of whack, then there are some towns along the way before I get into the real boondocks wilderness of the route that I am taking, more or less straight south, well, southwest-ish. I will be crossing the border into Idaho. And so as I drive along, then it smooths out, the brakes quiet down, and everything seems to be fine. So let's just do it. So I drive and drive and drive. It is 5 hours to the US border. Now, I think that I got a little distracted there when I first brought up the subject that things have changed since I was last in the country last December. Of course, we all know there are major immigration crackdowns, people being taken out of the country, put in El Salvador prisons, put in like Sudanese prisons or whatever. So there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. And as I said, I was born in Canada. Now, that doesn't technically make me an immigrant because I am still a natural born American citizen. So I could run for president. US Senator Ted Cruz was born in Canada to an American mother, and then his father was like Cuban Canadian or something like that. My parents, both born in the US, American citizens, moved to Canada in the early 1970s. I was born there, and then we moved back when I was a year old. Born to American parents means you are a natural born American, an automatic US citizen, regardless of where you were born. And so I am absolutely 100% a US citizen. I didn't even need to get naturalized or anything. But still, there's a little issue going on between the US and Canada, and Canadians are being harassed. And add to that, I have 2 passports, and in those passports I have a lot of stamps of questionable countries, shall we say, Iraq and El Salvador and various countries in the Middle East, Israel, West Bank. I forget. No, there was not a border stamp into the West Bank, I don't believe. No, we just drove in there. But anyways, when you factor in those 3 different things that kind of put me outside the box, then it seems of anybody, I am a person who could potentially be taken aside, questioned, who knows what. So I was just very nervous about that. But I am encouraged by the border that I am crossing seems far less likely to be a problem, as opposed to flying into New York, Miami, Los Angeles, big, customs area with lots of employees and them getting lots of people from all over the world. Here I will be crossing a border, Canada and US, in which the border guards on the US side are going to be perfectly familiar with Canadians coming in. And it's going to be a small one. It isn't, the same as the one over by Vancouver. Between Seattle and Vancouver, that is a much bigger facility. Here it's going to be a small little operation. And so that all sounds good. So I'm still nervous, but I get there that day, pull up. There is 1 car in front of me there being checked, questioned, or whatever. It rolls away, I roll up, 1 guy there. And so he asked me, why were you in Canada? And I say, well, it's a long story, but here is the short version of the story, much shorter than this video. And so in 1 minute or whatever, I explain, I went up there to get my Canadian passport, which I have, and show him. And then because of winter conditions, I parked the car and I went traveling. And he says, okay, have a nice day. There you go. And boom, I am back in the US. And that is really the end of the story. Perfect timing, back at the parking lot. And so from there, I drove all the way through Idaho, or a section of Idaho, into Washington State, partway into Washington, stayed at a hotel there for the night. The next day, woke up early, got started driving. Now, as I mentioned before, I was kind of considering whether to maybe park the car in Portland, Oregon, which is a base of mine, and then catch a flight down to California to visit family down here and save me the drive down and back up. But ultimately decided, you know what, I want to have my own car. I don't know how long I'm going to be down here. And so I decided to just keep going with the momentum. I got to Portland like late that morning, went to my storage space there and switched out some stuff, dropped some stuff off, got some other stuff, and then back on the road, drove all the way down into Northern California that same day, another night in a hotel, and then the next day got back down here. And so that would have been like July 10th-ish, and I said it's July 18th, and so been here for around a week, catching up with the videos, hanging with family, and really just chilling. So there we go. You guys are all caught up with everything, and I don't know what my plans are from here. Oh, I need to fully finish the story, the tooth. So that was one motivation, was I go to the dentist here generally, and so I called them, got an appointment. That was for, yeah, that was just yesterday. That's right. Because yesterday, no, it wasn't yesterday, it was Tuesday. Today I said it was Friday. No, it was back on Tuesday. And so I had that appointment set up to have the broken filling checked. I also wanted to get a cleaning. I got another appointment for the same day. So went in Tuesday, got the cleaning done, second appointment that same day, got the examination, and everything in my mouth was fine except for that tooth, and I need another crown. Those things are not cheap, $1,500, and it takes 3 weeks. You need to go in for the first appointment. They do all the drilling and everything, prep it, put on a temporary crown, and then it takes up to 3 weeks for the finished crown to come back. And so I go in yesterday for the drilling. They're in the process of drilling that tooth, and in the middle of it they realized, oh man, the tooth right next to it needs a crown as well. But fortunately I'm all numb on that side already. They say we can just do it right now. And so I say, yes, let's get this all done at once. And oh, I forgot to mention, they initially made that appointment for August 8th for the drilling appointment. And so I was gonna have this long wait for that, and then another 3 weeks after that. But they put me on the cancellation list, and they've always been really good about getting me an appointment quite quickly based on cancellations. And so fortunately, next day they call and say, we have an appointment the next day, which was yesterday. So they're drilling, and they realize, oh, you need another crown. So they drilled 2, and then put the temporaries in, and I now have an appointment in almost a month, next month, to get that done. So that is then going to be a factor for my upcoming plans from here, is now I have this wait in which I need to be back here in 3.5 weeks or so. So I haven't thought ahead yet as far as what I'm going to do next. Tons of options. Explore around here, catch a flight somewhere, go to Hawaii, go to the Caribbean, go to Central America, go to Japan, go to South America. You can do a lot with 3 weeks. So I will be thinking about that in the next few days and figure something out. So that is it for now. Might not be much going on for a little while. We shall see. I have no idea. So more coming from somewhere. See ya.